Yeah, so I was looking for a topic for this week on account of me not having one yet. And I'm flipping through my Instapundit because usually he doesn't know it, but Steve Green usually prepares two topics a week for that are actually shot, his and then the one that I steal from him.
That you stole from him. Yeah, that's a rich mine of content.
It's a pretty good.
Yeah, there's so much good content there.
So I was looking at the story that was just posted saying that Blue Origin got awarded the NASA contract for a moon lander. And I thought, okay, I'd heard of some of the other competitors, and I thought, well, by all means, let's give it to the company that hasn't gotten into orbit yet, that is 9 years behind schedule. But wait, just before we rolled camera, Scott said, "What are you chortling at?" And I had known for months now, since you guys told me that the Artemis mission required the Starship, required the SpaceX Starship to go to the moon. I just saw the first picture of it, and it looks like it looks like a barracuda kissing a minnow. You know, it's not impressive. The Starship's impressive, but the Artemis capsule looks like it looks like a vestigial kind of thing.
Tiny little leftover bit, yeah. I decided not to get too snarky on Instapundit this morning, and I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing this. But the original Instapundit lead-in to that story about Blue Origin getting the lunar landing contract was they'll still have to hitch a ride to get it there.
Yeah.
Well, at least it's. I looked at the two other contenders. There's the SpaceX lander. There's one by the national team. There's one by Dynetics. And I'll tell you what.
Is that those L. Ron Hubbard's thing?
Yeah, that's right. I don't know how it is possible unless you use. They must be using AI, because humans alone cannot design spacecraft that ugly. It's not possible. Those are the most horrendously. It's just not possible that people could design two things that miserably ugly.
Oh shoot! I just lost my train of thought.
Let me jump in with this then while you're re-railing your train.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Bill, when you said that Blue Origin got the contract for the moon lander, for some reason I immediately flashed on. That's like Barack Obama getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
Precisely correct.
At the point that he did.
That's exactly right.
And then that reminded me of I just got there's a new book out just last week, a biography of Martin Luther King Jr. called King, A Life, by a guy named Jonathan, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, E-I-G, Eig or Eeg or something like that. Anyway, one of the many interesting things in this book, and it's really a good read. I found it very difficult to put it down, which really disturbed the other motorists on the highway, by the way. But anyway, while one of the things that struck me is when Martin Luther King Jr. received the Nobel Peace Prize, he publicly said, "It's really premature for me to receive a peace prize when all I have basically are aspirations, and I have not been able to accomplish that which I set out to do." So, at least he had the
character,
the humility, and
it was the first time I saw him be humble.
What's that?
It was the first time and maybe the last time I ever saw him be humble.
Well, at least he had it in him.
King? Oddly
enough, no, I thought you were talking about Obama.
No. This
with the peace prize thing. Sorry, I got lost there.
Just saying you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah. Obama said what? Just one. But the
and what took
you? No, he was actually bemused. He was like, I don't know why I'm getting this thing. I mean, he took it and the money, of course, but on the announcement,
at that time the prize was $54,000 in cash, which King pledged to give away to the cause, and he did. They also gave him a Rolex watch, which he wore for the rest of his life.
That seems more than reasonable to me.
Yeah, and then he felt bad because Ralph Abernathy, who was basically King's right-hand man through all his trials and tribulations and challenges, Abernathy got very little recognition out of that. And King actually went out and bought Abernathy a Bulova watch and gave that to him. And even though Abernathy's feelings were hurt by being ignored by the whole Peace Prize thing, Abernathy wore that watch to the end of his days.
Nice. Although, Scott, you did remind me of my favorite Deep Thoughts by Jack Handey. When I pass away, I want to die peacefully in my sleep like Grandpa did, not screaming my head off like everyone else in the car.
There's a pilot version of that, not screaming in terror like his passengers.
That's right. Now, as Bill attempts to sync up the audio with the video of this after the fact, Bill, take into account that as soon as Steve opened his mouth, I knew the joke and I started laughing. So it's going to be really hard to see.
It took me 4 hours to put together this thing, and
I could barely say it without cracking up.
That business about the
Where's that Phil Hartman voiceover? Just perfect.
That business about the one guy gets a Rolex and the other gets a Bulova, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah. Abernathy got a Bulova, which is a nice watch.
No, it's a nice watch, but it's not a Rolex, right?
Rolex.
So that reminds me of that joke that Mark Wahlberg and George Clooney played on Ice Cube. Did you hear about this in Three Kings? It's the all-time greatest practical joke ever. The three of them had rented. They had gotten costumes. They were like dress costumes, like tuxedos for some sort of event or something, right? And they were all provided for them, based on their fittings for the movie and stuff. And so they're putting these things on, and George Clooney just pats around and reaches into his breast pocket, and he pulls out like a little envelope and a card, and it says, "Just wanted to thank you for the amazing work you did on Three Kings. Here's a $100 bill." And Wahlberg reaches into his thing and he pulls it out, and here's a $100 bill. And Ice Cube reaches into his thing and he pulls it out, and it's a $50 bill. It was Clooney and Wahlberg together.
Who was it allegedly from?
I don't know who it was from. It was Clooney and Wahlberg together and on this joke. But I thought that must have. My God, that moment must have been something to see.
If he had pulled the 50 out first, he would have felt pretty good about that, like your old story goes.
Exactly.
Until he found out the other guy's got $100.
Exactly.
By the way, the King biography is a pretty direct biography. Like, they're not shielding you from King's various weaknesses, including his tendency to plagiarize things that go back to like when he was writing college papers, the alleged various dalliances he had. Although Coretta apparently, when they asked her directly about it years later, she gave a very political answer, but it was the answer that you would expect from somebody like her, who, at least as far as you could see so far in this biography, always acted with integrity in the best interest of her family and the best interest of Martin, and trying to advance the cause.
Graceful.
Yeah.
Basically said, I know. Go ahead.
Well, she basically said, I've heard the allegations, but I can tell you that there's been no indication from my husband that he is anything less than in love with me. I'm loosely paraphrasing here. Yeah. There's been no indication that he's dissatisfied in the marriage. A woman knows when her husband is cheating, and I have had zero indication that my husband was cheating. Now, nevertheless, the FBI was
they were going to make a big deal out of it.
In my opinion, wiretapping every place this guy could possibly call, from his home to his office to his good friend's office and home, and various other places, the Willard Hotel in Washington when he came to stay for a weekend. And so they think that they have all this evidence that he was cheating, and there actually have been women who've said, I had an affair with Martin Luther King. So it seems pretty clear through the book that yes, in fact, he was doing this, and that he was a plagiarist, but he wasn't a greedy guy. Like, he wasn't after money.
He wasn't a grifter like Sharpton or
by
Jesse
all accounts,
Jackson.
humble. Everybody who knew him, he was gracious. Everybody described him as being really easy to talk to. He really seemed to be listening to you. He like everybody who met him liked him, except for maybe Bull Connor and J. Edgar Hoover. But
defund the FBI.
Nevertheless, so as you're reading this, you know this, okay? So you're going, okay, the guy was unfaithful to his wife. He's a plagiarist. He, whatever other flaws he had. And then you read what he said. I think it was called Holt Baptist Church, the evening when things really just sort of kicked off. And you read what he said on the mall at Washington, D.C., and you read his response when somebody stepped up onto the stage while he was speaking once and punched him in the face. And there was a woman on the front row that said after the first punch to his head, Dr. King basically dropped his arms. She said, like a child. He just let his arms fall and let the guy take another swing at him. And then somebody tackled him, and he invited him backstage and had a conversation with him and invited him to stay at the event. The guy was like, he was a member of the American Nazi Party that had just punched King in the face. So you see all of this, and you read the words he spoke, and tears are running down my face as I'm reading the impact that he's had on people, and you're like, holy cow, what a flawed man, and look how a flawed man can be used to turn the tide in many ways of history.
Yeah, and
it's stunning.
And the one doesn't, in my opinion, the one doesn't affect the other, I mean, they're separate domains.
It made me think, how they have that big statue of him in D.C. now, not far away from the
one
Jefferson
made by
Memorial,
the Chinese where he looks like Kim Jong-un. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, it's not a good statue. He deserves so much better.
It made me think about, we portray King, we portray Lincoln, we portray Jefferson as these much larger than life characters, but it made me remember my favorite statue of famous Americans, and that is in the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, where they have the room and they have of all the life-size statues of the people who were there drafting the Constitution, and they are all made in the actual height of the people as they knew it to be. So you can walk right up, like I'm about the same height as George Washington, and I can stand right in front of that statue and essentially look him in the eye. I tower over James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, and you see that, and it's almost like, yeah, we need these kind of statues too. You need to see that these were ordinary men, not giants that are 6 stories tall. There's nothing wrong with the Lincoln Memorial or even the King Monument for that matter, as far as how to portray him. It's trying to capture an idea.
Well, you're saying it's not. You're saying that the Lincoln and the Lincoln Memorial's not. It's not to scale.
I knew he was tall, but
there's one like that of Thomas Jefferson in the museum. Underground below the Gateway Arch, between the legs of the arch.
Oh, really?
And it's as I remember, I've been there in 40 years probably, but as I remember it, not only is it life-size, but it's just right in the middle of this big open kind of underground atrium.
Yeah.
And you just walk right up to it, and it's like Jefferson's there.
There was a guy, these things, after I read the section on the so-called I Have a Dream speech, I wanted to watch it again. I recently have listened to it, an audio version, and then I forget who the famous actor was. There's an actor whose name, if I said it, everybody would know, but I can't think of it now. Anyway, you hear Martin Luther King read it, and then you hear this guy read it, who's a professional actor, and you go, hey, could I listen to the King version again? Even though this actor is fantastic, it's crap compared to the actual delivery, the way King did it. But he was
there in front of how many people? I mean, you can't simulate that energy, that feedback.
So the things I forgot about it were, I knew he was like on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. What I didn't remember was there were dozens, if not hundreds of people behind him. And this was not at some distance like they do now, where there's a stage and then there's a gap and then there's a stadium kind of seating. This was like they were right up behind him. Like immediately behind him. So there's a big crowd of people behind him. The people who were in front of him were right down in front of him, like they were close. And the staging of this thing was horrible. Like by modern standards, nobody would do this. The lectern had wires hanging all over the place coming off of it with the various microphones. And anyway, there's a guy up there who is, I think, a state trooper. His name is Gordon, I want to say Gundeman. They called him Gunny. He's like 24, 25 years old, state trooper, wearing like the Mountie hat, the state trooper
smoky hat, yeah.
And his job is to protect Dr. King. And so he said he had never met him before, and this guy was one of 15 kids who grew up in rural West Virginia and really didn't have any connection with or even understand what the whole civil rights movement was. He didn't know any black people. He's like completely isolated from that. And now he's standing in front of this ocean of humanity, largely black, but also a lot of white people there too. And this is his first exposure, to this conflict or this division in the country. And he said, when Dr. King, who was like the 10th speaker on the lineup that day and the last, approached the microphone, just kind of emerged out of the group and approached the microphone, he said his first thought was, wow, he's short. And, because he was like 5'6", 5'7", something like that. And it just shocked him how this guy who he had heard about but had never seen was so short. Anyway, as he's approaching the lectern, Gunny, the state trooper, reaches over and moves the microphones down so that they will be aimed at his mouth and they won't block the view. And then he stands right next to him the whole time during the speech, and he's looking around, he's scanning the crowd, he's making sure there's nobody coming from behind. And at one point, King, I forget which section of the speech it is, but King is really kind of lathered up and in the heat of it. And all of a sudden, if you're watching the video, which is cropped close on King, you see this white hand come in and push the microphones down a little bit more. And he said, I wanted to make sure you could see his face. And it's just like, I don't know why that got me so, but this kid who was a state trooper, he's a young guy, wanted to take care of this very famous guy and make sure that people could hear him properly as he was saying this. And King
and see him properly
doesn't even seem to notice it happens. Like he is just in the zone, and he doesn't look at the hand or anything like that. It's just like Gunny was taking care of him, and he just kept going. The whole speech, King is clearly reading from notes until he says, I have a dream today. And then there are no notes. Why? Because it wasn't in the notes. And from that moment, the only part we remember
is that
about the speech, it's when he wasn't reading his notes. He never looked down again. And like the first or second time he said, I have a dream, you hear the voice of Mahalia Jackson, the singer.
Yeah,
She says, tell him about the dream.
Oh, you hear her. She's actually there.
Yeah.
She's there. I
thought you meant you you metaphorically heard the voice.
No. She's sitting there like she's close to him or standing there, and you just hear her voice off camera go, tell him about the dream. And then he just goes into this whole thing about the dream and about one end of the country to the other. And there are so many just nuances of this thing where people who care at all about public speaking or rhetoric need to study this. Like he didn't say from Stone Mountain, Georgia to Lookout Mountain, Tennessee. He said from Stone Mountain of Georgia to Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. And the preposition changes everything. It's like it makes it a powerful phrase in a way that just giving the location on a map by saying Stone Mountain, Georgia would not. Anyway,
I've listened to the speech. I can't tell you how many times, but I never picked up on that.
The one,
loving this book.
The speech I got the most attention for was right after Romney lost in 2012, and I give that rattle the windows in Benghazi speech. And that was 100% unscripted. There's, I think the thing about public speaking is that the people who are good at it find a way to just basically take themselves out of the equation. It's like it's almost like a beam coming down, and you're just simply saying the words. You didn't write them, and then they're not yours. You're just a modem basically, and when you hit that kind of groove, what's happening is your subconscious has got a hall pass or something like that, and you just plain go with it. And I think the reason that doesn't happen when you're not speaking in public is because if you do that and you can tell that you've got an audience really enraptured, then it's a very difficult thing to explain, but it's like I don't have to be a modem anymore. I just send it, I just send it, and those are amazing experiences. I know that the ones that I've done, the ones that I've done, I was most proud of, especially later in my career. I would come back down, sit down, and say to Natasha, "Oh, that was wonderful. Everybody loved it." I said, "What did I say?" And I have no idea, and I was hoping it was good. So me and King were like this, neck and neck in terms of
that's right. Like a lot of speakers after the fact, there's that high moment that you experience when you're doing any kind of performance, basically. And then afterward, you kind of crash because you can't maintain that pitch of enthusiasm and excitement for very long. And then, he spent a lot of time in basically being depressed, doubting whether he was doing the right thing. He had a lot of, you don't hear about it now because once the assassination happened, then the people who were bad-mouthing him in real time during his life shut up about that for the rest of their lives. But he was getting a lot of criticism from within the movement, so to speak, from different leaders of different organizations and even in his own organization who are basically saying, you're too soft, this nonviolent approach isn't going to work, you need to be here, you shouldn't be there, you can't go, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're wasting money, So there was constantly this barrage of criticism hitting him all the time, sometimes from people he really respected. And meanwhile, the FBI is eavesdropping on him. Robert Kennedy okayed the first eavesdropping, on King. He didn't have a great relationship with Jack Kennedy. Neither one of them really hit it off. Robert Kennedy was kind of two-faced. On the one hand, he was being supportive. On the other hand, he was okaying the wiretap.
The wiretaps, yeah.
Yeah, and Lyndon Johnson was the same way, that after Johnson became aware of the stories of King's sexual infidelity, then he became a lot cooler in their face-to-face or telephone interactions. So anyway, I can't say enough good things about this book, not in the sense that you're going to read it and go, wow, that's awesome. What lionizing a great American. It's just kind of an unvarnished look at one of the greatest, one of the guys who will go down most in history for his accomplishments and for his impact and for his inspiration. And it, in a weird way, is encouraging because you look at it and you go, okay, well, I could be really critical of his flaws, but I might want to take a look at my own.
Yeah, I've often, like I said, I think they're separate domains. The work is the work, right? It's the work is the work. And Jackson Pollock, by all accounts, was not a swell guy. That doesn't make his paintings any worse. And you're not buying a morality guide from Jackson Pollock. You're buying a painting from Jackson Pollock, and this whole idea of, well, this person, yes, but he had this, and he had this, and he did this. It's like, get up, grow up. Seriously, just grow up.
I've said for years, I try not to read too much about the artists whose work I enjoy, whether they're musicians, actors, whatever, because the more you know about their personal lives, the more difficult it is to enjoy their work. So I avoid as much of that as I possibly can.
There's two other small nuggets from that book that I did not know and I should have known. Martin Luther King Jr. was not his name.
I did not know that.
Martin Luther King Sr. was not his dad's name. Their names, were both named Michael. And it's this weird sequence of events. When he was a boy, his friends and his family called him Little Mike. And then somewhere along the line, a census taker came along and inaccurately recorded the names of the father and son as Marvin L. King. Okay? Just got it wrong. And then at some point, Daddy King, that's what they called him. Daddy King goes, and I think he may have taken the family with him. He goes to Germany and he goes to Wittenberg, and he sees the church where Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses on the door of the church, and he was so inspired by that he took on Martin Luther's name as his own, and his son then was referred to as ML. Not until I think it was his graduation from college or graduation from grad school at Boston University, not until then did his name ever appear in print as Martin Luther King Jr. And so that was fascinating. I didn't even know his name. The other interesting name thing is Bull Connor. Bull Connor, the Alabama Public Safety Commissioner, or whatever his official title was. Bull Connor's real name was Theophilus Eugene Connor. Theophilus, for you biblical scholars, is a name that appears, I believe, in Luke's Gospel, where he's writing an account of the life of Christ, and he addresses it to Theophilus. Now, Theophilus could have been an actual person, but it also could have been a personification
lovers
of people,
of God, right?
Because lovers of God is what Theophilus means. And I just thought, lover of God, Bull Connor's real name was lover of God. Unleash the hounds.
Well,
anyway, that's it.
I think bull is probably a better word for him.
Yeah.
Wow.
No doubt.
But it's about an 846-page book. I'm a little less than 500 pages into it, less than a week after I bought it. So I've just been gobbling it up.
That sounds good.
Oh, I'm reading some fairly cheesy science fiction right now and enjoying the hell out of it.
Oh,
I needed some non-thinky reading. I've been doing way too much history and stuff. So
Thinking is
I'm not even sure the title of the second book in the series. I don't care.
Did you all see the SpaceX docking with the ISS?
On Monday, yeah.
You know, I actually, what's interesting about that was I saw like some video of it, and and this is honest truth. I just went,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's like, yeah. We're routinely going up to the space station and routinely doing this stuff. I'm kind of over it.
Pardon me, it's another civilian flight.
Yeah, and they've got one of the passengers. I think this is fascinating. One of the people on the crew that just came up. Now there are 11 people living in the International Space Station, but one of the four on the Crew Dragon capsule was a Saudi woman, and I'm thinking this is amazing. She just flew in a rocket to the space station, and when she gets back home, she probably needs to ask her husband to drive her to the supermarket.
That's actually a profound observation. That's a profound observation.
Imagine.
Also, if you want to touch the edge of space and kind of claim to be an astronaut, you call up Jeff Bezos. But if you got a lot of money and you want to go on a tour of the space station, you got to call Elon. That's your guy.
Yeah.
To get you to actually go somewhere.
Yeah, that Jeff Bezos, that's the guy who I wanted to pin on getting me off the surface of the moon. I want a guy who's come very, very close.
He very
nearly made it on several occasions.
It's actually, they're renaming the company Space Adjacent. Have you seen you've probably seen this many times, but there's a picture, like a blueprint almost, of the landing pattern that the Crew Dragon capsule has to take approaching the ISS. And so picture like the ISS is, you're looking down on it maybe, if you can in space, look down or up on anything, but you're looking down on it, and the Crew Dragon actually arrives behind the ISS, and then it flies around, like it takes an arc around toward the front, and then it does a 90-degree angle and it comes in like next to it and toward the docking port, which is kind of sticking out from the side of the ISS. There are these way stations where they have to, they pass through like way station 0 and 1, I think, but they had to stop at 2. That's normally they're supposed to stop at all of them, but they were doing well. And all of that, 270 statute miles above Japan, flying at, 2,500 miles an hour or something like that?
Oh, God, no, it's 16,500.
Yeah. Is it faster than that? Okay. I know that they see 16 sunrises and sunsets during the course of a day. But anyway, all of that traveling at that incredible high speed, and they're like, okay, now as they're approaching the soft docking thing, I forget what they call that, soft something.
Soft docking.
Anyway, yeah. As they're approaching that, they say the Crew Dragon capsule is traveling at 0.2 miles per hour, and now it's 5 meters away, and now it's 3 meters away.
Well, it's still going very fast, just relative to the space station. It's
so the reason they
you don't want to bump those things into each other.
The reason they do that is because the capsule has to actually be cleared in. So there's like an outer zone, and if it enters the outer zone without trouble, then they can clear it into a closer zone, and then if that's working out, they can clear it in for approach and docking. But the reason it does that to fly around is it's basically testing its maneuvering thrusters. You don't want to have one of those things go south or go missing, on final. So you want to make sure that those things are working, and you also want to make sure that you've got good control of the vehicle. And every time you see these movies of docking, it's like, it's like, you guys in a hurry, you going someplace? No, it's an hours and hour long process, and it is a little frustrating. Yes. It's like, can we speed this up a little bit? And I'm thinking, why? You're going to save 10 minutes, a half an hour, and risk losing the station?
The whole thing, yeah.
I think they were 150 meters away from the ISS, and I was watching, but I had to get out and do my morning walk. So I go out and do my morning walk. That's like, I think it was 42 minutes. So I'm out there walking around. I walk more than 3 miles. I come back to the house. They have not docked yet.
Yeah, it took them longer to travel 5 meters or whatever than it did you 3 or 4 miles. On the off chance I ever get to dock with a space station, I realize my odds are fairly low. It's going to have to be to Strauss's Blue Danube.
Yes, exactly. And in fact,
I'm going to insist that they play that.
If I'm going to dock with the space station, I want them to rotate that space station. I want it rotating by the time I get there, and then I want to match the rotation, and then I'll do the docking. Then I can die a happy man. Somebody did a video using Microsoft Flight Simulator or something, where they basically showed you what it looks like to travel at the speed of the space station at about 1,000 feet above the ground.
Holy cow!
It's something like Mach 35 or something.
Unnerving.
It really is. It's
the
LA
word.
to New York in about 25, 30 seconds maybe. Ay caramba.
Well, okay, the circumference of the Earth is roughly 25,000 miles. So,
I said round numbers, yeah.
Yeah, and so your orbit is something quite a bit longer than that, because you're, 270, 280 miles above the Earth.
Yeah, so you're doing 16,000 miles an hour, so you don't get a full orbit in an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, it's they're moving.
They are moving. And now they're going to deorbit it.
Really cool.
They're going to what?
They're taking
the ISS?
bids for a vehicle to deorbit the space station in the 2030s.
Oh, yeah.
Can't they scavenge that for parts for other things they want to build up there?
If they had a plan.
You would think that they would say, hey, let's take some pieces off of this and build something else.
So many of those parts are so old, I don't know if they necessarily want to, even if they had a plan.
They did.
I was pretty upset about hearing it, after we put all the money and effort in the space program and shuttle just to build the station, now we're going to deorbit it. But I guess it's reasonable. It's been up there 50 years by the time that it goes, and it's leaking, and it's, but they plan to deorbit the thing in one piece.
En masse?
Yes. And they're aiming for that.
Wow.
There's an area of the South Pacific close to the South American coast that is apparently the remotest area from anything on the Earth. It's the biggest place where you can draw a circle and not hit anybody. And
don't we already have that giant crater? Couldn't they just put it right down in that crater that the asteroid hit?
I'll tell you something, man. I think if somebody was, and who knows, maybe they will. There are eclipse chasers who travel the world looking to watch solar eclipses, and I'd be one of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll charter airplanes, but when it's known when that thing is coming down, I would pay real money to see that happen, because that would be the most spectacular thing. I mean, it'd be unbelievably spectacular. Probably 60 sonic booms.
They were showing video from with the Crew Dragon capsule is still at a distance of some couple of 100 meters, and all you can see is a red light and a green light, and the red light means left and the green light means right, or vice versa. Anyway, so you can just see those alternating blinking lights. And then the person who was narrating this video says, now all those other little what look like multicolored stars in the background that you see, and it looked like you were looking up into this spectacular Christmas galaxy of like green and red little lights, and I was like, wow, I've never seen that view before. They said, those aren't stars, those are dead pixels because of the radiation of space. It's affecting this image.
Getting computers to function in space apparently isn't easy, and older, slower processors are easier to shield against all the nasty stuff flying through space.
Wow. Well, anyway, you should watch that kind of stuff any chance you get. And I had to go to work, so I wasn't able to stick around. It was another 2 hours for them to equalize pressure between the ISS and the Crew Dragon capsules so that those people could make their ingress and get out of there and then live together in harmony.
Steve, you might know this.
Months.
No offense, Scott. Do you is the Crew Dragon, is the Dragon capsules at 7 psi pure oxygen, or are they breathing air in there?
I have no idea.
It's a mix. It's a combination of oxygen and nitrogen, and they were going to equalize it to about what Earth's atmosphere is. So that's what they said. It was going to be around 14.
So the one of the brilliant things about the American space program was that when the Soviets flew their space missions, the inside of the capsule was air, regular air, pressurized to more or less, probably 8,000 feet, but still, it's
airliner pressure.
Yeah. And
the Americans said, well, hey man, if we just use pure oxygen, we can go with much, much, much lower pressure, because we want the oxygen. 90%, 80% of what we're breathing in is nitrogen. Let's just do pure oxygen. And that was fine until you had to do the Apollo-Soyuz mission. Then you had a real problem, because I don't think the Apollo capsule was rated for that kind of pressure. So you could build it much lighter because you're operating at a much lower, internal pressure.
Wow.
Dang. I didn't even I watched that Soyuz link up. I think I was in second grade. I must have been, because Mom and I had that crappy apartment. And I remember watching that on the little colored TV that was probably about that big. And that crappy video was still some of the coolest stuff I'd ever seen.
You know what the single great...
And so this explains why the Soyuz capsule looks like a steampunk bathysphere.
I'm not making this up. Do you know what the hardest engineering problem was for the Apollo-Soyuz mission? This is not a joke. The toughest problem they had to solve was they had to find a way to do this without making one of the spacecraft look like the male and the other look like the female. That was the overriding concern of this.
Yeah. There was a lot of politics involved, and there were negotiations and such.
Who's docking who?
150 years ago in this country, or in England for that matter, they would have had no trouble saying, we want to go to space and have intercourse with our Russian brothers. That would have been a normal locution.
Good Lord. Wow.
Other breaking news today, and I watched a little bit of this, is that Senator Tim Scott, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, has announced that he is seeking the Republican nomination for the presidency. And in hindsight, I should have watched like the condensed version, which I'm sure the campaign will put out eventually, because it was so awkward for so long that I just it was like I had to stop watching because I felt bad for him. Like, I don't know him. I really never watched him before. I don't know if I've ever seen him give a speech or anything like that. And he seems like a nice guy, and but it was like they didn't. That should have been scripted and choreographed, and literally when he got done his kind of freewheeling, saying whatever came to the top of his head thing, and thanking his mom and thanking the widow of his mentor and all this other kind of stuff, then he said something like, "Now I'm going to do the speech."
Oh, I'm glad I didn't watch this.
And maybe other people will watch it and go, "Hey, it's kind of charming that he's not slick," and he's not. But maybe he gets slicker once he gets onto his scripted speech. But I just thought, oh my goodness. I mean, I know none of the existing other candidates that we know of anyway. I mean, Donald Trump obviously has his own unique way of speaking, but it's now like a brand, and so it doesn't come across as being as awkward as this was. And that's not to say anything bad about Tim Scott or his potential as a candidate or his utility as a president of the United States or anything like that. It's just like you can't imagine that he has any advisors. Like somebody should have come alongside of him and said, "Okay, here's what happens, Tim. You walk up onto the stage, you immediately launch into your speech. At the end, if you want to bring your mom up, that's great." But he was speaking as if he was at a clam bake with a bunch of his neighbors who, would have known him and that he could just be real folksy with, instead of the fact that he was about to unveil himself on the national stage.
That reminds me a bit of Fred Thompson when he was running for the nomination, I guess back in 2008 now. And
yeah.
he barely campaigned. He'd ride around on his golf cart with this attitude of, "I'm running for president, and if you'd like to give me your vote, I'd sure like to have it."
I remember that, yeah.
And that's about as enthused as he ever got. And that made me want to vote for him.
Me too, 100%.
Fred Thompson was the first political candidate and one of the few political candidates to this day that I ever gave money to. It was a small amount of money, but I wrote him a check. I was so impressed with him. And then when we were out there at the convention, I ran into Fred in the airport on my way home. And there were some people kind of standing around talking to him. And I had my little flip video camera. And so I was videoing him from relatively close distance, 5-6 feet away. And he looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I was just videoing you. I'm excited to meet you," or something like that. And he's like, "Turn that off. I don't want you to do that." And I'm like, can you imagine today if some politician said, "Don't video me. The last thing in the world I want is an eager fan posting video of me on social media." So that hurt a little.
Yeah, I guess. I just found my story.
Oh, good. I imagine the people who made the flip cameras looked at the first iPhone kind of the same way the dinosaurs used to watch asteroids.
Yeah. I still have my flip video camera here, and I think it still works. However,
I always thought they were
the
great.
Rubber on the oh yeah,
and we had one.
Like
we
this
loved
little.
it.
It's got a little USB port that, or whatever it is called, plug that pops out from the side, and you can stick it in your computer. Anyway, the rubber on it though has become like tar. It's like a tar pit. Like you can't.
Yeah.
Once you touch it, it leaves blackness
It's
on
gummy.
your hands, and yeah, I've tried to duct tape it, but that's not ideal.
Less flippy.
trying to see if one other thing that I saw in the news this week that I wanted to, that's not going to be my topic this week. Gerard Baker has an interesting column in the Wall Street Journal, basically attacking Governor DeSantis of Florida and anybody else who would try to run against Donald Trump by saying he's unelectable. Now, Baker, the columnist, is no fan of Donald Trump. However, he's basically saying in this column, look, this is a disingenuous attack. Number one, he's already won an election. So yes, he's electable. Like, it's not unthinkable that the guy could be elected president because he actually has been elected president. And if you're a guy who's never garnered a single electoral vote in a run for the presidency, then maybe you should not be saying that he's unelectable. But the upshot of Baker's article was, he didn't say it this way, but I'm going to say it this way, that DeSantis and others who try to make this unelectable argument and basically present themselves as the alternative who is electable, is that it is a passive-aggressive effort to avoid saying what you really think about Trump. And Baker's basically saying, why don't you just come out and say it? But don't say he's unelectable. That's A, not true. B, disingenuous on your part, considering your own record. And it just makes you look like a wimp when you're not willing to actually say what you mean. And what you really mean is, well, he's electable, but I think he's bad for the movement. I think he's bad for the party. I think whatever they really think. And Baker's basically calling them out and saying, don't hide behind this veil of unelectability.
That's a legitimate point. Definitely.
No, I like it. Although part of me worries that as much as I respect what Trump did in office, at least until that final year, that maybe the secret to his election win in 2016 was how bad of a candidate Hillary Clinton was. And it's
that
just
helped.
Maybe the worst nominee of a major party, certainly in my lifetime. She made Michael Dukakis actually look like the competent guy he claimed to be. She was just
she made him look warm too.
Yeah, but, and this is the big but, Hillary seems to be floating a potential run next year.
Yeah, I get that feeling too.
There was just a headline on Instapundit today.
Yep.
Hillary saying, yeah, I think Joe Biden's age is a legitimate issue. Oh.
Well, and also she'll be that old when she runs. Steve just said.
Yeah, but there's old and there's old, and he's not aging as well as she is or Trump is.
Steve just said, and this is a big but, Hillary.
I heard that too.
I'm just saying. I noticed that.
Yeah, she's aging like fine milk.
Very nice. Well, I appreciate the straightforwardness of Baker's piece. I'm not a big follower of Baker. I don't know what he normally writes or who he is or anything. I mean, I know he writes for the Wall Street Journal, and I'm sure I've read some other of his pieces, but I don't know where he's really coming from. But I like him calling out these people and saying, "Say what you mean."
Yes, that should always be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well. Totally off topic, but I'm going to mention this because, Bill, I know you're a beef jerky fan. I can't believe I waited this long to get a pellet smoker.
What I'm known for. I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is my third smoker now in the last 10 or 12 years. I tried a column smoker. It sucked, even with the big water thing in there to temper the heat. It was just too much hassle. I got rid of it. Tried an electric smoker for a few years. It's just too easy to overdo, and the wood chips just don't get the job done. Bought a pellet smoker. Did my first batch of beef jerky yesterday. It's one of the best batches I've ever done, and there was almost zero effort to it. Just you set it up.
Was it easier than tearing open a plastic bag and reaching into it and pulling out the already
most
made
supermarket
beef
jerky is absolute crap. The only good store-bought beef jerky I know of comes from the Smokehouse in Chesterfield, Missouri. It's the only store-bought jerky I know that's actually any good.
You take that smoker and you add some serious hydraulics to it, you probably could make Slim Jims. And but you'd have to compress,
I don't
you'd
want
have
my
to
food
compress it to
extruded.
practically compress it to criticality. Because I used to love those things, and those I look at them now and I just go,
Oh, yeah.
Lord.
It's salt and grease that they've somehow extruded into a tube shape, into a cylinder.
I feel like that's what ZZ Top was singing about. You know, that famous dance. Need I go
Tube
on?
Snake Boogie.
Which one?
Yeah,
Is that what it was?
Tube Snake Boogie.
Oh,
Yeah, good song.
It is a great little song, and I'm just like, I don't know what this is about or whether I should play it, in front of my mother-in-law, but it's got
Probably
a
not.
backbeat. You can't lose it.
How did those guys?
I'm trying to think anything.
Good.
Oh, we went to see
ZZ Top were
a,
masters of the single entendre.
yes, we went to see. There's a production of a musical that is being done under a tent that they built that looks like it's been there forever now. It's one of these magnificent structures where once they build it, you're like, isn't that a building that's been there for as long as we can remember? So it's this magnificent thing in Texas, near Dallas, and we saw a production of this thing. I don't even know what to call it. It's called His Story, and here's how I would summarize it. It's Hamilton for Jesus. So it's basically...
How's the music?
It's like a rap thing, but the story is not Hamilton, it's Jesus. And I sat there wondering, I mean, it's for what it is, it's well done, and it's kind of amazing that they can throw this tent up that's air conditioned and we can sit there for a couple of hours and watch this thing, and then the singers were all great and all that kind of stuff. But I thought, who is the audience for Hamilton for Jesus? Because it's so, like, even calling it His Story is basically saying, if you're coming to this, you're probably a church guy. You're already on the inside because you immediately knew when you saw His story who this was about. And then you go in there and, like, the average church guy is trying to figure out what they're saying because the rap, is just...
You might trick some people. At first I thought you were talking about some Michael Jackson thing because His Story was the name of one of his greatest hits collections.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not the one. That was the one that had a giant, like, 700-foot tall statue of himself or something made of gold, right?
Oh, nice.
Remember on the artwork somewhere there was just
I don't remember. I just remember the title. Let me look that up.
So I guess people afterward asked me, they said, how was it? Well, I actually got a pair of tickets free because my employer owns the land where the tent was. And so they said, hey, we'll let any of your employees come to the show for free. And so we got a couple of tickets and we went to see it for free. And normally I think the seats we had would have been $50. So my review is, if I had paid $50, I would be sad. But since I didn't pay $50, it was fun. And if I had paid $10 or $12, I would have thought, that's fair.
So a movie ticket price is worthwhile, but not a theater ticket price.
Yeah.
Okay. It's an important distinction.
Well, and that's all the distinking I have to do here today. Anything else that we need for the good of the order before we get into the actual work to which we have been called?
No, that's all I got. Unless you want to hear about the fact that I'm going to smoke a whole chicken this afternoon as soon as we're done here. I'm very excited about this.
Going to go through a lot of wrapping paper, Steve.
I was picturing the size of the meerschaum required to hold the average chicken. All right. Steve Green's giant Banny Rooster Bong.
Oh, man.
That would be a great name for a folk band.
That's right. By the way,
I want to see their touring van, because that's going to be a spectacle inside and out.
just a week or so ago, the Country Music Awards were right nearby where I live in Frisco, Texas. They had it at the Cowboys' relatively new practice facility, which is called the Star. And so Dolly Parton and Garth Brooks were the co-hosts of the award event. And Dolly Parton looked, when she was talking, she's a little crooked now. She's got a lot of work on her face, you can tell. And, she's I think she's 80 something maybe.
She's one of the best people in the world.
She is. And I'll tell you what, though, she gets up there and there's this song. And frankly, I think the song was terrible because it was like a political rant. And I was like, okay, enough of that. It was a political rant that was saying we don't need any more political rants, essentially, which is the worst kind of political rant. Anyway, but she can sing like
yes, she can.
Very well at her age. And I'm like, holy cow, is there anything that this woman can't do? She was just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and she's releasing an album of her doing rock classics because she said when they invited her to be part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, she felt like she hadn't earned her bona fides to be part of that genre's Hall of Fame. So she decided she would cut an album of classic rock songs.
And now I got to go listen to it because I know it's going to be good because it's Dolly Parton.
Yeah. And I recently listened, I think it's called Storyteller or Songteller or something like that. It's kind of like an audio book, but really it's a series of long interviews with Dolly about her life. And if you haven't heard that, you will come away with Steve's assessment like she's just an amazing person.
No, she is.
Yeah.
Really genuinely good and talented.
And good egg.
Hardworking.
And I only found out about this a few years ago because, as I said earlier, I try to avoid knowing anything about the artists I like. And out of the blue one day, I can't remember what story it was she was reading, Melissa starts telling me that Dolly Parton has given away literally millions of books to kids to promote literacy. Yeah. Millions upon millions of books. And then I have to know more about this person. And it turns out, yes, she's just an amazing human being.
Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda, who were, I think, with her in 9 to 5, the movie, when people were asking them, they're like, what's Dolly like when she's casual? Because we only ever see her dolled up, so to speak. And they both said, she comes out of her dressing room in the morning looking like that. We have no idea. We have never seen her without the wig and the makeup and everything. Like she has not let the veil down for a moment.
That's actually good because now that I think about it, I think if you can imagine her without all that stuff, I think it'd be quite shocking.
Yeah. I don't want to know.
I don't want to know either.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me enjoy the magic.
Yeah. Well, you've had enough magic for one day, my friends.
Yeah.
So now the magic's going to end, and we're going to get down to the practical special effects of creating some episodes of Right Angle for you. We appreciate your support. We know that you do this from your heart, and because you resonate with some of the ideas that you hear here. You don't always agree with all of the ideas, but you have been stalwart in your support. We thank you for inviting friends to watch these episodes, and we thank you for your continued financial undergirding, without which we could not have done this for these many years. So for Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. We'll see you this week on Right Angle.